On iOS Today, Matthew Cassinelli walks us through his core apps, and then we're going to get deep into the weeds on shortcuts.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Wow. And welcome back to iOS Today. I'm Rosemary Orchard, and I'm not joined by Micah Sargent this week. He went on vacation. Wow. Finally. So this week, instead, I've stolen his Smart Tech Today co-host, Matthew Cassinelli. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hello, Rosemary. Thank you for having me. It is an honor to fill Micah's shoes and also to get to hang out with you for an hour and ask you a bunch of questions as I go through my stuff. So I'm excited.
Yeah. This is a really great opportunity for us because you and I use a lot of the same apps. We're both fans of shortcuts. We both do a lot of things in similar ways, but equally we do a lot of things in very different ways. And your core apps in particular are very different to mine, and they're also very different to Micah's. So this is a good opportunity to get a new perspective on some things. And of course, we've got all of our regular segments as well today. We've got news, Shortcuts Corner, feedback, and our app caps, including hats. We did not forget the hats.
Oh, yes, I've got my own hat.
Oh, yes. We're not superimposing. There's no CGI on that bit. But yeah. So, Matthew, let's dive straight in. What is your first app that you want to talk about today?
Sure. Let me pull up my iPad in this fancy view. I want to tell people the good news about Endel. And first of all, I'll just preface it with, if you are seeing all of my home screens, I have way too many. And we will get to that in the Shortcuts Corner because I want to ask Rosemary questions about that. Let me even see where this is right now because I have so many. I do use the focus modes now to switch screens, but Endel I have in this folder, and it is a soundscape app. So it's kind of like white noise type stuff, but it uses AI. I don't know. They say that on their website. I don't know exactly how they do it, but it's got like a generative soundscape so that it's based off of what you're doing or the different modes that you're in, things like that. So let me play a little sample because it is just nice and relaxing. I think this will come through.
I'm not hearing it on my end, unfortunately.
Oh, no. Oh, it's the Ecamm isn't passing it through. Okay, I'll have to find a sample or something like that. But it's very, very relaxing. There's relax, focus, and sleep modes. And they've got this cool whole UI thing too. They've been adding more modes like AI Lullaby. What is this one? Deeper Focus. One that's called Wiggly Wisdom that has Alan Watts quotes, I think, every once in a while and things like that. And then also, what's this new one? Recovery. Yeah, I haven't used that one much yet. But part of the reason I love Endel is they've got this amazing circadian rhythm guide for you. So it basically checks what time you woke up in the sleep app and then generates kind of this graph that's waves and dips throughout the day of naturally, like your body goes through these cycles, and it usually starts with when you wake up. And so basically when you're kind of in a dip, in a natural energy dip, they're like, you should turn on recovery. When you're in kind of that increase in focus, it's like put on the focus mode and it'll help you zone in. So one of the ways I like to use it a lot is their widget. I got it right here. So it says like midday energy fade right now, which is, it's always interesting, especially doing podcasts. It's like, I can tell when I do Smart Tech Today that I'm in that zone, like it during one moment, but then I come out of it a couple minutes later or something like that, just because it's over an hour long. And that's usually the cycles. But I really like this just because it gives me this ambient awareness of kind of how I'm feeling in a way that otherwise you can really misattribute to other stuff. It's like the whole thing of like, am I depressed right now or am I just hungry? It's like kind of like that, but just like, oh, it's the middle of the afternoon. That's why I don't want to do my work. And so I use this sort of as a permission to like take a break and feel good about that choice and then come back refreshed also and focused when I do it. So Endel's really cool. And they've, of course, got a whole set of shortcuts that I'll say I personally requested from them because I was like, please add this. So I can just say like zone in to Siri and it'll start playing the focus modes and stuff like that. Or I like, I think I just call it sleepy time. And if I'm taking a nap in my office, which I do tend to do pretty regularly, I'll wear the AirPods Max, put on the noise canceling, and then just say sleepy time, and it'll start playing that, and it cancels out the construction noise that has been going around my house way too long, like this entire summer. So having these nice relaxing soundscapes is a way to give me some sanity back also, I'd say.
Yes. Yeah. I have to say I use dark noise, often blended in with music for a very, very similar sort of effect. But of course, it doesn't have this logic behind it where it's looking at your circadian rhythm and so on. How much in a day would you say that you listen to the sounds from Endel? Is it most of the day or is it interspersed with music?
Yeah, I do mix it up with music. I tend to listen to music more. And I've been I used to use Endel more. I think in general, the pandemic sort of killed some good habits that I used to have better. And I just kind of forget about some stuff, but putting it in the widgets and things like that, especially on my iPhone, helps. But I listen to it definitely at least every day. And especially when I notice that I'm in that dip or something like that more. But I need to use the focus. The focus mode itself is just really nice it's kind of like the effect of music, but there's no lyrics. And I mean, if you have an Apple Watch, it will base it off of your heart rate and things like that. So it actually is pretty cool where it just like matches your natural body rhythms. And so I think that's something I really like. Dark noise also. I've been using that. I used that while I was camping the other week to play white noise with the iPhone battery pack overnight, and it actually lived through the night. So that was a really good use.
That is impressive. Yes. Yeah. I've been using the iPhone MagSafe battery pack a lot recently. I went on a trip to London, not last weekend, the weekend before. I went all the way through the Anchor 5K battery that magnetizes onto the back of the iPhone, as well as my MagSafe battery pack by the time I got home. But my phone wasn't dead. It still had 30% battery. And this is a mini. So, it doesn't have amazing battery. But yeah, I'm really glad that Endel is using that possible integration from the health app there. And just for clarification for people who are listening, focus modes are it's the focus feature in Endel rather than the iOS 15 focus modes, which we're going to talk about later. We've not got to that yet because people who are watching the video will have spotted widgets all over Matthew's home screen on his iPad, and that is with iOS 15. And of course, there are 15 features that we love. I've got an iPad running iOS 14 here as well, which we're going to use later. But yeah, so that's Endel. I really like it. It's free in the App Store for anybody who is looking to try it out. And then Matthew has it in-app subscription, I believe it was, $60 for 12 months.
So it's definitely, I think it was, they've got $10.
Oh, sorry. There's two tiers for 12 months. There's $30 or $60, depending on which version you are going for.
I
because
never
there's
understand
also
the in-app purchase thing because it's like they've got multiple versions.
Unfortunately, if you view the website on the Mac, it is not the most helpful when it comes to looking at these links because you don't actually know what it is until you look at it in the app with the title and the description to see what is what there. Okay, so the next one.
I was just gonna say, I think I accidentally bought a year originally, and I was actually pretty skeptical about paying for it. But as a solo entrepreneur, I actually have found that it helps me with focus, and that just sometimes you do a lot of stuff that sounds nice, but this actually helps me on a daily basis. And so to me, it's definitely worth paying for.
Agreed. Once you find an app that really genuinely helps your workflows, it is worth paying for. It's I have a very expensive office chair here and a very expensive, reasonably expensive keyboard because I sit in them for 8 to 12 hours a day using my keyboard and so on. So I need, you have to invest the money where it's worth it. For people who only use their chair for an hour a week, obviously, you're going to find different things which are worth your money. So Matthew, let's take a turn away from sound into word because your next step, Slugline, is not one I'd heard of before today. And I want to know, how are you using this? What is this app? How are you using it?
I always gotta celebrate that when I have something that Rosemary doesn't even know about. It's like booyah!
Oh yeah.
Wow, I just said booyah. So Slugline is a screenwriting app, and I use this to write the scripts for my YouTube videos. And partially, I ended up going with this because, in general, I got pretty interested in just it's like how do people make actual movies? Like that's what you're doing with YouTube to a certain degree. Obviously, there's a whole different set of considerations, but I wanted to figure out just like how do you communicate not just what you're going to say, but what you're going to show also. And in a screenplay, I guess is the format. There's just the space for action in addition to dialogue. And so that was something that I always noticed with shortcuts videos is that I can explain as much as I want, but I have to be showing you something at the same time in order for you to understand it. Usually, I mean, of course, you can just explain it through audio, but when it's designed for video, you're supposed to be showing something at the same time. And so being able to put in line, like, this is what I'm going to show, here's the shortcut. And then even stuff like I scroll through the page because I just realized that I was doing all this stuff in my B-roll shots and it would take me a long time to figure out after the fact. And so instead I'll write in the screenplay format, which is just plain text, but Slugline takes that, the considerations that you do for screenplays, like putting your name in all caps to be the character as opposed to the dialogue and stuff like that. It'll format it for you. So you can actually write in any app and then just view it in Slugline. But basically I put the entire script in with all of the action and usually an outline and things like that. So I can kind of track it. Slugline for Mac has a specialized outline view that you can actually visually see how long sections are going to take. And it basically just reminds me of like a Final Cut timeline in my video editor, where I can just see, oh, like I'm going to take way too long in that middle section. That's just kind of boring and people will stop watching or something. So I can adjust that and basically see the pacing too. So Slugline's really cool.
Yes. Yeah. No. So I'm guessing, some of the things like writing actions and so on, if people were writing a traditional script for theater or a screenplay, then these would be stage directions, person enters from stage left and, with a cart or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm thinking Into the Woods here. For some reason, that's what popped into my head. But Slugline, so it seems to me that Slugline is available on iPhone as well. I'm guessing you're primarily using this on your iPad with a keyboard of some kind?
Typically, but I also do like make edits and things like that. And part of it's nice just to be able to, there's a preview mode too, so you can just read the script, and I'll do that a lot. Especially because I try to think a lot about the experience for a mobile viewer, because most people watch YouTube on their phone.
Right.
And so going in and just like reading the script on my phone and being in that environment, I think is something that's helpful, but I'll make little changes and things like that. I mean, I think some of the screenplay formatting stuff is definitely not designed for typing with your phone. So I do actually sometimes write like some of the basics in a different app and then move it into Slugline for the kind of video pre-production process, as opposed to necessarily writing it all in here. But it's still, that's kind of the point of it too, is that it's flexible and it can sync through Dropbox too and stuff like that. So it's great.
Yes. Yeah. So do you export things when you're done with Slugline, or do you want to show an example of a script in Slugline itself? Yeah.
This is just a basic one where it's just like once I put in all of the sections, I would break up. Let me use my little trackpad so people can see like each paragraph, because it does tend to, it's very similar to writing for iMore actually, which is it's a lot of times like simpler paragraphs and things like that. But in a video, almost every single sentence, you end up showing something different or transition into a different place. And so I'll say just like, this is a roll where it's showing I'm actually on camera. And then the second shot is B-roll and stuff like that, where I'm like finding my AirTag and something like that. So one really helpful feature that enables is when I'm filming, I know that I don't have to stare into the camera for those lines, because that was something that originally I would deliver my entire script without thinking of the B-roll first. And I would be focused on like delivering a perfect script every time, and like 90% of that acting or whatever that I'm doing and focused on like looking normal on the camera ends up being behind B-roll shots, and I never even use it. And so this was something that I actually got from MKBHD's. I think it's not a masterclass, obviously. He's not at that level, but what's the service that does like free or Skillshare kind of thing? He was like,
oh yeah,
that's really helpful to just know when you're speaking to the camera, and when you can just read the script, or like especially specs or something like that, you can just read it off the page while you're filming, because you know that the only thing is going to be your voice. So it actually makes a huge difference going through a more formal production process, even though it can seem a little silly, but I kind of was like, I might as well do what the industry does and do it for myself. But exporting, I haven't gotten this finalized, but in the Shortcuts user group, which is the community that I run, I worked with somebody to basically export the screenplay format and then turn this into a spreadsheet for putting out those B-roll shots. So it would go through and take that action and put it in like the right column, and then it would take the dialogue and stuff like that and put it in a separate column, and the person who's speaking and stuff like that. So that was actually but it's one of those things where if there's like one thing different in one spot, it'll screw up a lot of it. And so I also just haven't put together my iOS 15 video yet for this fall. So I'm going to maybe be hitting him up, Antonio, in the user group and being like, hey, let's work on that shortcut again. Because there's some shortcuts like that are every single person in the screenwriting industry could use to take their script and immediately start working on B-roll. And some of that actually can take a really long time, and it's kind of just wasted effort. So that's why I'm a big fan of shortcuts.
Yes, absolutely. And I see that you made a small edit to my outline earlier that said Matthew asked Rosemary abstract questions about shortcuts. But we're going to get to that. And in the meantime, I want to talk about your next app, because this is an app I actually do use. And I feel like I use it too infrequently, because it is a really great application for writing. And it's Ulysses, which is a beautiful writing app. It's available on all the platforms, just like Slugline. And I want to know, Matthew, how are you using Ulysses?
Sure. So I've got my whole special writing home screen also. I guess I didn't mention that I had a video home screen too that Slugline lived on, but this is my writing screen. And I have a set of shortcuts for opening into the separate folders and things like that. This is something that maybe I'm going to also use this episode to ask you questions, Rosemary, because I kind of went overboard. This is maybe something that if people don't know about me that I tend to do with iOS apps. But I outlined every single part of shortcuts in here inside Ulysses in their group sections on the sidebar, but like to the degree of like every single personal automation has a group, all the focus modes, all of the different folders that I'm working on and focus modes, every single category of action. So part of what if people aren't watching is I have like 200 groups in here, but I think Ulysses is particularly spectacular at organizing writing into different sections. And I like their group. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, for people who aren't aware, in Ulysses, you start with a document, and then within that you can have sections, and then you can group those sections together. So it's a hierarchy. So think of a group as sort of a chapter or a section, an act of a play, if you want to. But that's how you can think of it. But it can, of course, have its own information within that. But I really like how Ulysses does that, because it also has options to stick things together so that from your perspective, it looks like when you're previewing it that they are all linked together. But then when you're editing, you can rearrange whole chunks without having to select areas and cut and then paste somewhere else. And the groups have hierarchy as well. So you can go as deep as you like. So it's not just there are chapters within a book, or sections within a chapter, you can have paragraphs and then group those together if you want to. You can be as deep and as nerdy as you like, which as always with these apps, you can go super deep and do whatever it is that you feel like you really need to do with them, or you can stay at a very high level and just create one document in Ulysses and use it as a beautiful app to do text editing in, because that's what it is. And for people who are familiar with it, it uses Markdown, where you would use 1 underscore either side of a word or series of words to make it italic, 2 underscores or asterisks to make it bold, 1 pound sign and a space to make something a H1 title. And then, of course, they can export it as HTML. Anyway, Matthew, back to you.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how I use it too. I wrote like a big piece on all the new features for shortcuts for Mac. And basically what I'll do is outline all of those sections and then even just drop it into one document, and you can just select somewhere in the document and split it. And that'll take it into 2 separate sheets that are glued together, like you said. And so I ended up gluing together like my entire thing. And then it actually works extremely well for me, because it just takes what is a ton of information and breaks it into bite-sized chunks that you then complete. Like a digital document goes on forever, but if you are going through that section and move on, it just kind of gives a physical nature to what is otherwise still the same data and just organized separately. But like, it actually works extremely well for me. I'll lay out those sections and then just sit there like a busy bee and just go through it. And it's like separating some of that preparation from, in the same way I do with videos, like the pre-production versus the production part of writing it. And then even then, Ulysses can export it all as like a giant bundle. But I tend to post directly to WordPress actually through Ulysses, which is really nice too. And in the sidebar, you can add like tags. Here, why isn't this showing up? You can add your keywords that get passed into the categories, or if you attach an image, that becomes the featured image and stuff like that. So it's kind of, I do some of that in shortcuts also, but I kind of don't bother because some of it can just be done with Ulysses.
Yes. Yeah. So if people are looking for a really lovely app to write a WordPress post in and then post it to WordPress without dealing with the not great WordPress app, it's okay, I guess. Then Ulysses is a fantastic option for that. I highly recommend it, especially if you like to write longer posts and, really, do details properly and so on. It's really nice. And it also can give you things like a word count and an estimated time to read out loud, which can be really handy. I know personally, I'm using it at the moment to go through and draft some new sections for a book that I'm updating. Take control of shortcuts for anybody who's very curious, because I like writing in Markdown, and the application that I need to use for my publisher is rich text on my Mac only. And I'm using shortcuts on the iPad mostly. So I'm doing that, but it's fine because I can easily export it to rich text later. And that's not going to be a problem because Ulysses can handle that with many, many other things.
Yeah. And they have really good shortcut support too. Like you can, I will create a sheet and attach some of that stuff automatically when I create it. Or one thing that actually I really like, and I need to get this to a shareable place soon, but when you add captions to images, I have to like go through a process of attaching those to the image itself in iMore's CMS. And so I have a shortcut that will scrape the markdown and get the captions out and make a checklist so that I can go take the screenshots and then I can go in and upload them. And it's really nice because I'll have like 45 screenshots that I merge into stuff like that. And it takes a long time to add those in later. And so I can scrape that data straight out of the Markdown document, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that is, of course, one of the many beauties of something which is essentially at its core plain text. But what I want to talk about next, Matthew, is something that you've got here. And I've tried using this app a couple of times. It's not yet clicked for me. Okay. So I'm pretty certain you're going to, make that magic happen, snap your fingers, and bam, I'm going to understand Craft, which is a docs and notes editor. And for people going, wow, Matthew sure does a lot of writing. Yes, he does. But he's using all these apps completely differently. So Matthew, Craft, how are you using it? Tell me.
Sure. And I mean, I think part of the exploration over time is how do these fit together and which one should I use when? And I don't actually have all of the answers as much as sometimes I pretend that I do or something like that. But I think that's part of the beauty of this is just like figuring out what works for you. So craft, I like a lot in the way that Ulysses has a very, I don't know, they have just a different UI paradigm on top of text. Craft has almost like a UX to it in terms of it's very much an app that feels like things for me in that I can take text and especially on iOS and iPhone too. This is actually like probably one of the best iPhone writing experiences because of their features, but you can take like groups of paragraphs and then combine them into a sub page that then gets viewed on it. And so here's like a good example of, I have Smart Tech Today, like my most recent episode. We always grab all of the stories and different links and sections, kind of like how you do on this show. And I will just group them under headlines. And then I can go in and see, oh, here's the Apple stories. We're talking about these as we go through. This isn't the best looking document, but otherwise, this is like the same information that would take up a giant page and I can ungroup it all. But on iPhone and iPad, you can just kind of select these things and then group them and make what I use Craft for is to like make sense out of a lot of information in one place and condense it all and organize it into sections and things like that without copying and pasting once. Like that's the beauty of it, is that there's so many things that when you have a keyboard and mouse, you can just do really easily or really quickly. And then on iPhone and iPad, Craft is like my favorite by far of just, it's like you craft documents. It's called Craft Docs. So they named it pretty well. But they have a whole ton of features where you can backlink to other notes. And if you change some of the title of one note or another, it'll reflect that in the other note. So you can have this whole interlinked system of notes. And like they've added a calendar view so that each day you can just be taking notes on like, okay, I was on here. I can think, let me see. I think I did yesterday. It's like, I need a prep for iOS today. And then that links to the iOS today note. I didn't actually end up filling this out, but because I was prepping this morning.
You filled out the document that I needed to see as well. So thank you for that.
Exactly.
Because,
but it's just like, I can put in apps like Endel, Slugline, Ulysses, Craft, and then take this
Airtable.
And then with the keyboard group it all together and then sort of section off the stuff. And it's also infinitely nesting in the same way that Ulysses can be, but it's much more on the fly instead of like a built-in file structure. So for me, Ulysses is where I'm like taking something and turning it into like a blog post or something like that. This is where I'm trying to figure out the overlap, because I did put all of that structure for shortcuts in there. And I basically am trying to turn it into what I'm going to put on my website versus Craft is what I'm going to keep for myself long-term that exists in my own system. And so I am a little bit trying to figure out, is that just duplicating the work to do it in both? But Crafts I think enables me to take what would otherwise be hundreds of pages on my website and it could all live in one single document if I wanted to. But I'm a little confused with Craft as they've added some more features where I can't tell if I should be taking like a new note on every single thing and then just linking them together, or if what I do is I'll like just take multiple documents, pick them up, open another document and drop it in and combine them into a smaller set of information. And so I'm a little confused on whether or not, like, what's the optimal way to use that. But I might just ask. It
sounds like you've found a workflow that works for you right now. And I think a lot of these things with these apps, one of the reasons why we're going through your core apps is to give people, an insight into how they can be used. But just because, that's the way you're using it right now does not mean that's the way you need to use Craft next week. And equally, if people see what Matthew is doing with Craft right there, you'll find hopefully that maybe that could be something that you really like. And Craft, I've been using it a little bit for some collaborative documents with other people, where we've, been sharing things, and it's been really nice to just have one sharing link and then, be able to dive down into everything. I did feel like I was a bit confused to start with by opening it for the very first time on my iPhone, where I actually landed a totally different view to where I was expecting to be. And I started writing stuff and then nobody could see it because I was writing on my personal notes, not the shared notes. Mistake. That was my fault. But once I figured it out, it was much easier. And I noticed, Matthew, you mentioned trackpad before. So I'm guessing you have a Magic Keyboard hooked up to that iPad Pro.
Yeah. I love that's really nice. And that makes even like I can do gesture-based things without reaching up and touching the screen, because I totally had RSI like a couple years ago that I almost haven't had any issues since then. Sometimes if I do excessive amounts of shortcuts work without using the trackpad, I'll like start to feel it. But I think that's why apps like this actually are important, is because them making it easier to use actually saves me and enables me to do this depth of work on iOS without like sitting there with my dinosaur claws up trying to reach the screen and stuff like that. So I really like, here, let me look at the stats. This is always, I think they are like, you have some of the most notes of anybody in craft right now. I have 380,000 words. And I mean, I like documented all of how I make videos and things like that, because I was really struggling to understand some of the scale of some of what if you really want to do it right, like what does it take to do B-roll? And now that's all in one giant B-roll document that I can save to and add to over time. And so it's really helpful for me. I do wish I almost like had a team where I could be building this knowledge base in a way that more people could use. And I do try to like turn it into articles and things like that. But I think what Craft can help me do is make some of that closer to what it would look like on the web, and even some of the design stuff that I would add to it on top of plain text, because it definitely isn't plain text, but you can export to Markdown and everything like that. So they're really responsive too. They've added a ton of features. Like I specifically, it's like I'm asking for them for all the shortcut stuff, or like I discovered this when it was in beta too. And so they were really responsive of like, we want to make an app for 2020 and 2021, not stuff that came out 10 years earlier and is built with those UI paradigms. So they're impressive.
Yes. Well, that's Craft. But the next one is an app. It's more of a web service than an app in many ways, but it's something very near and dear to my heart because I use this all the time. How I prepped for iOS today was done thanks to this, because I have a whole series of things set up where I can just add a little bit of information. I run a shortcut here. Something happens in the background there. So over the week, for example, I collect the news articles and it all lands in Airtable. And then I just, copy and paste a couple of things out into the document, and everyone thinks, wow, Rosemary spent hours preparing for this week. And in reality, it's been a couple of minutes here and a couple of minutes there, and plenty of background reading, of course, and preparing stuff. But, I've tried to make it speedy for myself, which hopefully helps everybody else, like our fantastic crew behind the scenes who are always working incredibly hard making all this stuff happen. So Matthew, tell us about Airtable and how you're using it.
In case I'm just saying it again. My biggest problem is the scale of the stuff that I try to accomplish, of like every single action in shortcuts, or I have like 1,000 shortcuts. And so I try to back them all up into Airtable. Stuff like the links, like I want to see your setup now because that's exactly what I want to do. And I felt like my problem is, again, it's like I get really far in, but then I just switch back to like some other shortcut thing. But I don't even know how many cells in here, like at least 20,000. And all of those have their own custom data with rows and rows of information. This is how I run my shortcuts library and catalog and my whole business right now, because it's based off of these digital files that I can back up into Airtable. It's basically the middleman between my shortcuts collection and WordPress, and it enables me to add custom data while also like tracking all of the things that I need to. So it's very, very nice. I heard your line about not being an iOS app, and because
I said it's a service because at its core, Airtable is a web service. It's a database service where you can, build basically mini web apps with forums. There's automations and so on various tiers and so on. It is aimed at businesses and so on. But for anybody who ever, back in the day, I've forgotten the name actually of the apps that I wanted to say. It's on the tip of my tongue. Whichever the FileMaker, that's the one I'm thinking of. People who did a lot of stuff with FileMaker. FileMaker is still around, but for people who are looking for something similar to FileMaker, but different with Gantt views and all of that as well, but at its core is a database, Airtable is an excellent option because totally. You can integrate all of these things. It integrates with services like Zapier and Integromat for automations. So this is Airtable on my iPad, and as you can see, I've got a lot of bases. Each base is a database, so I've got things for all sorts of stuff that I do, This allows me to then, grab data. So I'm going to pop into iOS today. So I've got, for example, rows for every single episode and themes. And then I've got apps. So I can see all of the apps. And if I wanted to add something else here, so say, for example, Matthew, you mentioned shortcuts, then I can do that. And if that information is already there, that is, of course, great. But if I wanted to add something, which we have maybe never mentioned on the show, then I could just say Discord. That is an app that I use frequently to check on our Club Twid backend. Then I can add this. And then if I pop over into shortcuts, then I actually have a shortcut which will do a lot of the data that I need for me, because you can get shortcuts to talk to Airtable.
Can you show the shortcut? I want to see it.
I can try. Let me see. This iPad doesn't always sync. So hopefully it's got everything. So first of all, it talks to Data Jar. That's an app we mentioned in our deep dive of shortcuts a while ago. Shortcuts, fancy apps, extra apps that give you more power. So it grabs my credential for it. And then it knows these are the two views that it might need to talk to in Airtable. Because if I just pop back over to Airtable, I've got, these are, if you think of them in Excel terms, then they're sheets or they're tables within a database. I've got apps here, which are apps that have come up on the show. And then I have my app cap apps. And so those are the two tables that it might need to grab things from. So let's just pop back into the right shortcut. So it grabs those and it goes through each of them. Yeah, there we go. That right there is the problem. I just need to pop that in. Done. And then it will go through and it looks for any apps that don't have data. Actually, I'll just stay in shortcuts for now. So apps that don't have data, they don't have a price, they don't have a URL for the App Store, and they don't have a last updated date. This then grabs, and then it talks to another app, which is my iOS Today apps, and that passes through some information and then updates the actual app store. So it does things like check if the price is 0, then it replaces it with the word free, because that's what we write in the show notes. And it searches through the app store. And so if I run this, and it's actually going to pop up and ask me, because there's nothing there, what do I want to add? And so this time I can say Discord, and I'm going to end up with 2 records in the thing. And so I can say, I'm looking for it on the iPhone. And then it gives me a search of all the things that come up in the app store for Discord. And I can select that first one. And then if it wasn't broken, apparently it's broken on this device. I'm using it on iOS 15 primarily. This, of course, is iOS 14. Then it would update that. But then this means that all that data is in Airtable for me. And I see Doug in the chat room has just commented 1,184 shortcuts. Wow. I hate to say it, Doug. That's not all of them. But Matthew's got even more than me, I think, at times. We keep flipping backwards and forwards. You've got 1,299 right now?
Yeah. And wow. I need to break up some more of mine into smaller shortcuts too, because I went through a whole process of turning them into like one shortcut that did 1,000 things, but I think it kind of backfired because I struggled to like remember those sub tasks as much. But I do so my Airtable, I have literally the exact same thing. First of all, I have an apps database, and I need to do that same thing of making one that updates the missing information, because sometimes I just don't want to like search the app store while I'm logging the app. I just need the basic info. But I do the same kind of stuff with shortcuts where, first of all, I scrape the data out of the shortcut, and I look at the shortcut file and like get the comments out, and then get all of the action IDs. And then I have an actions database that has those action IDs. And so my shortcut will look for the same ID in my other Airtable and associate as I go through. This shortcut has all of these actions in it. And then on my website, I can basically do the same thing because I have it all documented there. And so when people look at my website, they can see this shortcut contains all of these actions and stuff like that. So that was one of my favorite things. But like, I also add custom categories on top of just like, oh, this shortcut runs without asking, so it works well with Siri and stuff like that. And then so the Airtable basically enables me to add that my own metadata on top. And then because it's also built with my own information, their API is really easy to use with shortcuts. But
yes. Yeah. So I'm just going to see if I can pull up the Airtable API, because the Airtable API is really good in that when you create an Airtable base, it automatically creates documentation for you based on those bases. And I've got it right here. So I've got documentation for every single one of my bases. I just tapped something there and I didn't mean to, so I'll pop back. And so if I pop down to iOS today, there is an option up here, show API key. I'm not going to toggle that on, but that can tell you the key that you need to talk to your data. And so without that information, all of the other information here on my screen is useless to people, basically. But it tells you how you can talk to it, and things like requests that you can do, how you can retrieve a list of records. And that's one of the things I do in advance of the show. I say, hey, go grab all of the apps for this episode of iOS Today, please. And it grabs the names, the prices, and the URLs. And then it pops me over to Google Sheets where I can just paste the data, and voila, it's done. So for me, I'm using this as a way to create a database for a lot of the things that I do, because it is a database. It's a very good database. And it does just let me do things like grab news articles that I found interesting over the week. And then they're all there. I can easily see this is this week's news. I select the ones that I want to share with iOS Today, and voila, we're ready to go.
yeah, exactly. It's just so flexible, and there are other apps that I do use in between or some things like that, or I'm kind of like recreating my own version, but it's basically because then I have my own API that I can hit with shortcuts. And I actually, a sub recommendation is Shortcutify for it basically adds custom shortcuts for services like Airtable, and you basically scrape your API data into the app, and then you can make requests directly. And so that actually made it a lot more simpler over time too. It is the scale of some of these things. Like, we are writing custom apps for our own business at that point, and it really is like, I need some more just engineering, what do you call it? Like discipline to be able to make this version of depth of stuff. But it's also like, it enabled my entire business. And so that is really important to me. So, and also I'll give Airtable credit real quick before we switch, of just their apps are improving a lot. They've added calendar view. They've added the Kanban view and stuff that you used to never be able to use. And so I'm really excited about that. And I encourage them to continue doing that.
Yes. Things like the Kanban view are how I deal with all the feedback that we get via email and Twitter, which you can send into the show. I'll remind you at the end of the show how you can do that. But whenever things come in via email and Twitter, I can just quickly look. Occasionally we get the odd spam email. Thanks, people. No thanks. I drop that into a delete column. I drop feedback into the feedback column, shortcuts into the shortcuts column. And then I can have a view where I can see all of your feedback and all of your shortcuts that we've not yet answered and grab them ready for the show. So if you want to send those in.
Does Micah, is he in on these? Okay, I'm going to get him. Yeah. We're going to make our own Airtable now.
Okay. Excellent. I mean, I'll help you out with that, Matthew. We're a team here at TWIP. We do that. I'll get you a fluffy white cat to go with that laugh.
Yes.
Anyway, yes. So next up, we have the news. So this week, there's been quite a bit of news going on. There was some really big stuff that we're going to get to right at the end of the news segment. But the first thing that I found very interesting, which I think might make a difference to how a lot of people in the US see this app, is WhatsApp is coming to the iPad. Finally. So for people who aren't familiar, WhatsApp is an alternative messaging application, popular because it has a multi-platform support. So you can use it on iPhone and Android. And there's no green bubble, blue bubble. Everyone is a blue bubble essentially in WhatsApp. So of course they've chosen green. But for years, you've never been able to use it on the iPad. You could log into the web application on the iPad, but that would then log you out of any other web instances that you were logged into. You could use the Mac app, but it was very much one device at a time. They didn't really want you using multiple devices. There have been a lot of third-party WhatsApp applications out there. They've never been very good. I've tried some of them. Some of them are very clearly scammy and not great and just filled with ads. But WhatsApp is a really important application for a lot of people in especially Europe and Asia. That's how people prefer to communicate over iMessage, where especially you have a group iMessage, only one person's on Android, and then somebody likes a message and you immediately get 7 messages back with this person liked this message, or woe betide you if you dare to share an image, and so on. So Matthew, I'm wondering if WhatsApp coming to the iPad might encourage you to potentially give it another try and use it more often, or is it, as far as you're concerned, not worth the trouble?
Yeah, I mean, I've never really used it. I use Telegram, and they do have an iPad app. That's my way of communicating cross-platform, I guess, maybe more. I do think having an iPad app though is going to be key to a lot of people, because it is if that's just, especially as it becomes more of a, I don't know, central device in some people's lives, or more for business purposes, just having to switch to your phone or something like that to contact people would be a pain. So I definitely think it's going to be a good call. And I think they've had a couple shortcuts too. So getting
so
WhatsApp, the Apple ecosystem could help.
Yeah, WhatsApp actually had shortcuts support for when Shortcuts was workflow before it was bought by Apple. But their send message, and for people who are using the audio, I'm using air quotes on send message, action didn't send the message. It opened it in the WhatsApp app, and they've recently updated finally to have support where you can send it directly without having to open the iPhone app. So WhatsApp for iPad is still coming. It's not here yet, but hopefully we will get there soon. Anyway, next on our list is Apple TV Plus has ordered a completely new drama called The Changeling, and it's based on a novel of the same name. And I was wondering, Matthew, have you read or listened to this book? Because it's been on my to-read list for a while, and I've not yet got to it.
I have not. I think I might have heard of this through my mom, because she's a librarian, and so she tends to recommend books, but I have not had a chance yet. It looks pretty interesting now.
It does look very interesting. And I'm wondering if it's going to be sort of Schmigadoon, where they just appear to be doing one season. I don't know yet if they're doing just one season of Schmigadoon. I have no insider information, unfortunately. But this has been described as a fairy tale for grown-ups. And it appears to have attracted a couple of stars. And apparently it's going to be out in late 2022 or 2023, which I find, interesting. Often we hear about a production company spinning something up, and then 6 months later we get it on our TVs. Apple is clearly, taking things slow with some of these things, but I also feel like it shows in their production values. Yeah,
and the star Lakeith Stanfield is amazing. He's so talented. I don't know if you've seen. Oh my gosh, why did I totally blanked on the show that he does. And now I can only think of Childish Gambino, not his actual name. But his characters are just very, very real, which I always appreciate. So that'll be interesting to see him.
Yes. I believe the most recent television series he was in, according to Wikipedia, I didn't have time to open it on IMDb, was Short Term 12. But he's also been in Selma and Straight Outta Compton. which you may be thinking of. He was given an award for that. But yeah, so I'm glad to see Apple TV is clearly commissioning new stuff here.
Definitely.
Yeah, next on our list, you can enable YouTube's picture-in-picture on iPhone. And I've seen people enabling it on iPad as well, Matthew. Have you already gone ahead and done this? Because it's currently a premium-only feature. I don't have YouTube Premium because I don't watch a lot of YouTube videos. And I find usually when I hit an ad, it's a clue that I should go and take a break from YouTube.
Sure.
So sadly, that's not working for them yet, in that I don't watch the ads and I don't pay them. So I guess that's not hugely helpful. I'll watch an ad before the start of a video, obviously. But, Matthew, do you have YouTube Premium? Are you trying this picture-in-picture? Are you happy with it?
Oh, yes. And I have it and I love it. I had the exact same experience, but it's like once you pay for YouTube Premium and you don't get those ads, then it's really nice. And you watch more YouTube in a way that I don't have any issue with like watching too many videos. If anything, it doesn't give me enough that I actually want to watch. It'll recommend me a bunch of stuff that I'm like, no, I'm not interested in that. I don't tend to get too deep in the rabbit hole, but it also just helps a lot not to get hit by those ads. But picture-in-picture is so good. I love it. I have always wanted this. And I like YouTube Premium did help me get into the YouTube culture of just like understanding who some creators are and kind of following their stuff, especially as I got into that space. But having it picture-in-picture on iPhone and iPad is fantastic. It really is like, it's absurd that we haven't had stuff like this until now. And it's by far the best way to watch something on your device and just keep doing other stuff. It doesn't take over the entire screen. It's kind of, it's absurd that it's taken this long. And it really is like, I will just like watch a bunch of YouTube videos now. I think they need to add in the queue feature that they do with Chromecast. And I think it's just built into Chrome and Android. So that you can just have multiple videos queued up in a row and add one and rearrange the list instead of it just doing autoplay. And then we'll be good. But like, I've wanted this for so long, and getting it. I think I was on Twitter and I was like, oh my God. And then a bunch of people were like, oh, I don't have it yet. And I was like, oh, sorry.
Yes.
I'm a fan.
So it is currently only available for premium people. YouTube has said that this is going to come to everybody, but they're also billing this as an experimental feature temporarily available until October 31st. So I would say if you have YouTube Premium, even if you rarely watch it on iPhone and iPad, do everybody else a favor and go ahead and enable this and use it at least once, because the more people who use it, then, the more likely it is that it's not just going to be experimental. But they also do sometimes put their beta or beta features into the experimental category. So fingers crossed, everybody is going to get it.
Interesting that it expires. I hope it doesn't. I would be very upset.
Yeah. I mean, I think they may have just put the available until October 31st because that's when they're planning on rolling it out to everybody. But hopefully. We don't know. I don't have inside context in the YouTube group at Google or Alphabet. So I mean, if anybody knows, feel free to let me know anonymously. I'm quite happy to pass that information along. But fingers crossed, everybody is going to get that soon. But speaking of things we're going to get soon, we're not getting iCloud Private Relay for everybody enabled automatically, which I hate to say it because this is a great privacy feature I'm pleased about. So Private Relay is, it's more than a VPN in that it protects your data by putting it through 2 hops on Apple servers. But it's been problematic in the iOS 15 beta so far. For me, it completely and utterly stopped everything except messages working on the internet, which is not how it's supposed to work. And it was routing all of my traffic over to the US. For context, I do live in the west of the UK, but I don't live that far west that California is a convenient place for you to route everything that I want to do on the internet. That did clear up after beta 1. It started routing things through New York, but that is still a long way out of the way for things to go when really I'm just trying to access something that's hosted here in the UK. I was trying to access BBC iPlayer and things just weren't working. So it is now going to be disabled by default with iOS 15. So the feature isn't going away. It's not being stopped. It's still coming, unlike SharePlay, which Apple has officially said is delayed and is not launching with iOS 15. You'll have to go in and manually enable this. But I feel that that's for the best, because it does seem to be very problematic, especially for those of us not situated geographically within the US. And also at least for me, it keeps breaking my internet, which is way less than ideal. Micah. You're Matthew, not Micah. Micah's not here today. Matthew, what's your experience has been with iCloud Private Relay?
It was mixed. I think it made a little, it's always hard to tell when you're on the betas whether or not it's just the device itself or like the cell signal. But I noticed I just have a particularly old home with lots of like edges and hardwood that doesn't pass through signal. And so I just found that anywhere where I normally had slightly worse signal, it was just like even worse with iCloud Relay, probably because it was trying to send it around. So I think I ended up turning it off. And now I even see a weird alert that it tells me my network isn't compatible with it. So I wonder if that's an Eero thing. I was occasionally getting that when I was on the Wi-Fi as well. I'm also running an Eero network at home. I'm just running the cupcake Eeros, as they're called, not the Eero 6. But I've seen a lot of people apparently having issues with this. iCloud Private Relay will only be available as part of iCloud Plus, which is what Apple is going to be calling the iCloud subscription plans that come with more storage, the ability to host more cameras. Of course, the number of cameras you can host is going to be increasing as well, which is excellent for everybody who is already paying for this. But speaking of iCloud Plus, there's another feature, custom domain names, where you are going to be able to use, for example, MatthewCassinelli.com as your email domain through iCloud. So previously you would have had to go to Fastmail, ProtonMail, Hover, Namecheap, Google with their G Suite to host that kind of email. And now you're going to be able to do it through iCloud. Matthew, are you planning on doing this? I'm not sure. I do have G Suite. I think I was just trying to figure out what this gives me besides. Yeah, I mean, maybe just because I don't particularly use it that much, I don't find as much of a need for it. But it is always interesting. Like, I specifically don't have any shows where I cover news like this. And so this was one of those ones where I was like, because I think I also haven't been on Twitter. I've just been signed out during the day. And so I was like, wait, what is this for? Like, why do people, this is one of those things where sometimes it's like, if you know that you want it, you're like, oh, awesome. But then just finding it for an average person is like, why would you necessarily need this? But I guess it is mostly just if you have your own domain names.
Yeah. So it's a great service if you have your own domain name. And for people thinking, what's the advantage over using at iCloud.com or at gmail.com or, whatever? Well, the advantage is if I decide, so I'm hosting my email currently with Google with their G Suite. If I decide, hey, I don't want to use Google anymore, I can move my email which is, rosemaryorchard.com to iCloud, or I can move it somewhere else, but I don't actually have to change my email address, which means that it's kind of like an email forwarding service, only it's better because it's not stuff that's being forwarded. It's just, something going, actually, everything come over here now. It's kind of air traffic control for that. So for people who want to try this out, and I know a lot of our listeners and viewers do have their own domain names and have been, anxiously awaiting this. If you go to beta.icloud.com, then you can configure this and it'll walk you through everything. There is also an Apple support document for this, which I'll make sure that we link to in the show notes so that everybody can find that. But I'm glad that this is here and it's already working. I've heard from a couple of friends who've been trying it out. Because I use my email for my Apple ID, I was a little nervous to use this straight away just in case everything went wrong. But I've heard from a couple of friends that it is working perfectly for them and they are incredibly impressed. And this also comes with the hide my email feature, which is very similar to Apple's private relay, where they will do a random series of characters at privaterelay.apple.com to forward to you so that other people don't have your actual email address. So if you go, I don't want stuff from them anymore, then you can just block that entire address and it's gone.
I think it's especially like because I set up with Gmail originally for my own personal thing too, and that's my ID. It's just like email. I don't want to mess with that. I will say it's been a pride in my life to schedule my business so that I almost never use email. And so thankfully I just like try to never use this kind of stuff if I can avoid it. So
yeah. I don't have the privilege of not using email. And also, just to be very clear, I love getting email from all of our listeners. Please, if you want to send me an email, please do send me an email. But Apple is also actually this week. So Apple have changed previously. Apple charge all app developers 30% of sales through the App Store. And they've made some changes previously where people do a year-long subscription. In the second year, when it renews, they will take less of a cut in that. And also for small app developers, they're only taking 15%. But Apple has now said, among other things, that they're going to halve their cut of its in-app purchases for publishers that also participate in Apple News, which means that, companies like, I guess, the New Yorker and Wall Street Journal and so on will have even less of it taken out, though I'm imagining that those companies are turning over well over $1 million every year so they won't qualify for the small business program, which of course means that they won't get two lots of discount on this. But Matthew, I was wondering, what is your opinion on this? Do you think that journalists really are entitled to have more of the profits from this, or is it just that Apple are trying to promote things?
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting in context of the next couple of stories that we're going to talk about also, but I do think definitely that Apple News hasn't provided a strong enough experience for publishers to actually be worth it to give away their stuff without making as much money from it. So it's pretty logical. And especially I think it's an interesting just sort of incentive system to get everybody into Apple News also, because that does provide a better experience for the user once everybody's in there. And then if they're making enough money in a way app as well, that they can just like sort of offset if there was losses from people not just viewing it in Apple News. I think that does make sense. And just finding ways to get more developers money that Apple doesn't necessarily need or something like that is always a good thing. So, but yeah, I think in the context of the next two, it's kind of an interesting move and the timing in terms of how they're addressing issues that companies have with how Apple operates. And I think publishers had big issues with Apple News because it was like, it's a lot of work to get your stuff into that format and have it just be worth all of that extra investment too. So this can kind of offset that.
Yeah. And speaking of this, you alluded to this, Matthew. Apple has lost a class action lawsuit, which is not Epic versus Apple or any of these other big ones. This is a completely different one related to developers wanting to be able to tell their users about other methods to purchase the content of their apps. So say, for example, Netflix can now say via email in support emails to people, you can also just sign up on netflix.com and it's cheaper. And similarly, YouTube, by the way, for people who are looking at YouTube Premium, cheaper directly through Google rather than through the App Store, because they're trying to offset that 30% cost. And so app developers are now, according to Apple, allowed to do this. I personally thought that via email, so out of the App Store, they were always allowed to do this. But what is most important is that there is a retroactive thing, and this is just for US developers, so it does not apply to me, darn it, where people can claim money back from Apple if they should have been part of the small business program, but it didn't exist. And it depends. So the amounts vary based on the developer's historic participation in the App Store ecosystem. And it allows people to claim sums ranging between $250 and $30,000. So for some developers, this is going to make a huge difference. And sorry, Scooter X in chat room has just reminded me or just prompted me. They did not technically lose this. They settled. Yeah. I think that was Apple's lawyers saying, we are going to lose this case, so we're going to settle it instead. Fair. That's usually what that means. Not always. I'm not a lawyer, this is not legal advice. Yeah, so this is interesting. I'm glad that US developers are going to be able to get some money out of this. I wish European developers could too. That would be a very small chunk of change for me. But, it would be nice. I'm not talking about $30,000 being a very small chunk of change. I'm talking about the grand scheme of, what has come in through the App Store. Like $250 is not going to rock the boat here or there too much on that. Though that said, always contributes, new microphone may be required or something. But it is interesting that they have done this, and they've done this now before iOS 15 launches. I know a lot of app developers I've spoken to, I am an app developer myself, have said that developing for iOS is the only app way to make money. If you're going to pick between iOS and Android, then you're not going to make much money /any on Android versus iOS, where you are definitely going to make money. So it feels like developers don't really have much of a choice in this at all, especially because the other choice, Windows Phone, kind of just didn't work and does not exist anymore for that precise reason. But yeah, I think this is, I don't know if this is purely now timing to go, hey, people, get in on iOS 15 while the going's good. Or if it is just coincidental, but it certainly feels like maybe it was planned.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I think this is all tied in with their ongoing lawsuit, or I think they did trial with Epic and things like that. So what is kind of interesting around the story of what Apple is communicating, basically, where they're like you said, on Bloomberg, Mark Gurman was like, they already allowed people to talk in emails to their customers and talk about alternative pricing. And I think there was like either a fear or like some people got punished, even though it's technically allowed. So they didn't actually change anything there. And it's kind of just like, we won't get mad at you for doing this. And I think it just does get confusing because it's not necessarily the same claims that Epic and companies like that are lobbying against Apple, and so they're not like addressing those problems. This is a separate sort of situation, but it also has ended up being sort of a PR win for them, because it's like Apple is like making concessions on the App Store versus that's sort of just like combining it all into one story. So I think that was definitely an interesting part of this, is that like there's some great parts that were definitely necessary, but this isn't that overall story that like how Apple treats developers and things like that still isn't just immediately fixed by something like this. I'm sure the people who get the small developer assistant fund will be very happy, like you said, but it is, I think even just the fact that it's like a settlement for the US App Store only also makes it different. So it's not necessarily Apple changing their tune or anything like that, as it's like,
no,
they were making these concessions in order to not continue that lawsuit. So yeah, but it's still worth
the world is bigger than the US, even though sometimes it does feel like it's very US centric. Yeah. Anyway, up next, it's time for Shortcuts Corner. And now it's time for Shortcuts Corner. Oh, wow. All right. So today we have a question from Prof. Panda Bear in the Club Twit Discord about triggering as iOS shortcut, where one of the first actions is to take a screenshot. So Prof. Panda Bear says, my issue with the shortcut is typically triggered by calling on Siri. So the Siri overlay is captured as part of the screenshot, which is the first action. I do not want to assign the shortcut to an action like tapping the back of the phone, so I'm worried it could get triggered when I don't want it to be. Any ideas? Well, I had a couple of ideas, but Matthew, I was wondering if you had any ideas that you wanted to share with this, because I think we've probably got two very different approaches that we might use here for this.
First of all, I just want to say that I think this is hilarious. Totally fair of a question. Like when I first saw this, I was like, how does this work? Because you run the shortcut and then it takes a picture of you running the shortcut. So my strategy has been to use the wait action and something like open app in order to basically open that different service. And then in the background, it's waiting a second and then it takes a screenshot. but it is, if you run it from Siri or even I think the home screen, it'll still show the fact that it's running. And so it is like one of those ones that you'd have to just trigger from inside shortcuts, or I think through Spotlight would probably still work. But then it's just like, wait 1 second, or it's like open the app, wait 1 second, take a screenshot. And then usually I think that should work.
Yes.
I think you can even do, I just remembered trying to do this for my home screen, and I was trying to get the little green dots, which go away after a second. And so if you do use the wait action, you can use a separate number action and select that as a magic variable. I could set it up on my iPad real quick to show people, but then you could set it to like subs 1 second and like a half second and things like that, which is pretty nice.
Yes. So I actually, so I focused on a different part of what Prof Panda Bear said here, which is Prof Panda Bear didn't want to assign this to the back tap because it could be accidentally triggered. And there is a way around that, Prof Panda Bear, which I think might help. And I'm actually going to combine this with Matthew's suggestion of waiting a second, because the waiting a second, of course, perfect. That really helps things. So I'm just going to finish typing a second, and then I can show everybody my screen, hopefully. Oops, sorry, I'm just having a slight cabling problem there. Make sure that, there we go. So here is my iPad, and I have a menu here. And if the first action in your shortcut is a menu, then when it runs this action, it's going to come up with this. So obviously this is an iPad and you can't back tap on an iPad to trigger it, but you could trigger this with other things. Here's a tip. If you connect a mouse to your iPad, so I'm holding here a Logitech MX Master. If you connect this to your Mac, then you can actually program the buttons to do different things, including run shortcuts as well. So if, for example, I've got this middle mouse button right here, I could program this to run a shortcut to take a screenshot if I wanted to. So that could be useful for you, Prof Panda Bear, depending on what device. But obviously, you're looking at the iPhone here with the back tap. So I'm just going to go back here. But if you pop up this menu that says, do you want to take a screenshot? Then the first thing your shortcut is going to do is go, do you want to take a screenshot? And if you tap anywhere outside of this, then that's going to cancel it. Which means that if you do back tap on your iPhone by accident, and to remind people, you need to tap in the middle of your iPhone to trigger the back tap feature. So that is approximately on the Apple logo, and then it'll say running your automation, like mine is right there. So that will actually run it. But if you have that, so when you double tap that Apple logo, it pops up a menu, then it's not going to take a screenshot accidentally when you don't want it to. But it does mean that you need to tap yes to continue. And if you do run this via Siri, then of course you're going to have to confirm it. Sorry, Scooter X. I know that this particular mouse hates left-handed people, but the Logitech MX Anywhere, which I also have and love, it's my travel mouse, is much better for people who are left-handed or both-handed. So either way, back on the iPad, I would do this, which is you add in a wait action to wait 1 second, and then you take a screenshot. And then you can just do that. And then don't forget, if you take a screenshot, it disappears unless you save it to a photo album. Okay. So you're going to need to make sure that you save that screenshot to a photo album. And that's it. That's all you need to do. And now if you run this, then it'll say, hey, do you want to take a screenshot? If you tap yes, it'll wait a second, take a screenshot, and then you're done. And it's saved that into my recents album as a memory that I will have forever of episode 564 of iOS Today.
Lovely. Here, let me show mine real quick too. And here, just made this. So what I was saying before too is that if you have a wait and you want it to get to like a specific moment, you can tap and hold on the time for the wait and then switch it to a variable from something like a different cell, so that it's like, oh, I want it to go after 3/4 of a second. And then, just like having open app, or if your app does like allow you to open to a specific section too, you can use an action like that, which is pretty nice. Like for some reason I was thinking of Apple News Save Stories. I use that action. I don't know why you'd want to take a picture of your stories, but so hopefully
sometimes it's easier just to take a screenshot and then all of your screenshots of things that you've saved or in particular albums, which can be very useful.
Totally.
So for the next section of Shortcuts Corner, Matthew, I know you've got some questions that you wanted to ask me about shortcuts, and I prepared with an iPad running iOS 14 for extra difficulty mode. So what do you want to ask me about shortcuts?
That's fair. I guess I should have mentioned that some of it was iOS 15 type questions.
That's okay. I can still answer those in theory with my iPhone that's right here.
Just knowing that you have 1,100 shortcuts does give me some clues, because I went into like a realm of, I wanted to make all of my shortcuts kind of like apps where it would just be one thing that did everything for you. But it is pretty hard to just create a good experience when it just becomes a series of menus. Or I just had like one giant menu, which didn't really make sense. And then once you put it into sub menus, then it's just kind of like bearing what it can do. And I'm curious how much you use subroutines as opposed to recreating something in multiple shortcuts, and then also how much you use them with Siri.
Yeah.
So
there's quite a few questions there, but let's start with subroutines. So this is using the run shortcut action inside of another shortcut to go off and run something else. And the answer to that is I use that all the darn time. Like every single week when I'm prepping for iOS Today, I run one shortcut, and that triggers off about 6 different shortcuts to go and do things. That doesn't trigger them off simultaneously. It triggers them subsequently, or sequentially rather. But it means that during the week, if I want to go, if I'm sitting down on Tuesday and I do a bunch of prep for iOS Today, then I can, make sure that everything is saved and I've got all the details for all the apps ready. By just running that shortcut. But then when it comes to the time to actually, do the prep, which I do, a couple of hours before the episode airs, because I want to make sure that everything is right on the day, then I can tap one shortcut and it goes through and it does these things. And it ends by opening OmniFocus, which is my task manager of choice, to the project that goes, hey, this is your iOS prep for today. Nice. And it tells me to do things like get my app cap out, because my app cap is right there, or my hat for the app cap is right there, which otherwise I might have chosen which cap I'm going to wear. But if I haven't got it out the wardrobe, I might be sitting here at the end of the show going, what can I put on my head? And there's a heat gun over there, and I don't think that would be a great choice. It's not plugged in, fortunately. So I use subroutines a lot. And then your other question was about running things through Siri. And this is something I do some of the time, but not all of the time. And it very much depends on what it is that I'm doing. So I have one particular shortcut, which is preparing for guests coming over, because as things are slowly improving over here, a couple of friends have been saying they're planning on coming to visit. And I've realized that if people are coming over, then there are certain things that I always do. And some of them are smart home related. So for example, I will run my robot vacuum. I turn the air fresheners on for 15 minutes. I turn on all the fans and stuff just to circulate air and so on, just to, make sure that everything smells clean and fresh. It's clean. It just doesn't always smell fresh necessarily. Yeah. If I've been having a day where the gardeners have come and cut the grass outside. I live in an apartment complex where, gardeners have to come and cut the grass because they don't trust me with a lawnmower. Probably a good idea. Then that triggers my hay fever. So I always have to close the windows. So it'll also go around and check, oh, hey, these windows are closed. You should go and open them and things like that. And so this is actually running a shortcut. And then it pops open an OmniFocus list again of things that I like to do, household cleaning tasks that haven't been done in a while, that I like to do before guests come over, because that's a perspective that I've managed to create. So that is the sort of thing that I do run through Siri. But a lot of things are mostly HomeKit scenes that I run through Siri. Totally. And that is to some extent shortcuts, because some of these things are automations that have been converted to shortcuts. Like this thing turns on and then that does this other thing that is a convert to shortcut action. But equally, sometimes it's just turning on a series of lights with certain colors ready for me to go podcast.
Yeah, that's fair. I definitely use Siri for more home automation stuff. Do you name your shortcuts so that they like sound like things that you're going to say to Siri? Because that's something that I spend either way too much time on or not enough, because sometimes it's just like when you actually go to say it, you're like, oh, I would never say that sentence. And it's always kind of interesting. So
so I actually give a lot of my shortcuts multiple names, and this is going to give people a bit of a clue as to how I have so many shortcuts. So I'll give people an example of how I might give a shortcut a second name. So say, for example, I've got, let's just clear this search. And there's get details of weather conditions. Okay, this is a perfect example. That's a bit of a mouthful to say. Then I can create a new shortcut and I can give it a name, which I do right here. And I'm going to call it Ultimate Weather, which again is not necessarily something that you would say in the sentence, but it's something that Siri is going to understand. And then all I do is here, I use one action, run shortcut, and then I can select my shortcut, which was called Get Details of Weather Actions. So hopefully I'll find it. There it is. Get Details of Weather Conditions. And now I've got my ultimate weather. And what I've been working on doing, I've not done a very good job right now, as you can see. Some things are organized in folders. And then I had a bug with iOS 15, which took everything out of the folders, which was very demotivating. I need to go back and sort that out again. But what I could do and have done before is have a folder for Siri actions where I can then just drag this one, I believe. I used to be able to do that. My iPad is just crashing. There we go. Where
I see what's happening. Those blank folders.
Yeah.
I recognize that. That's shortcuts for Mac. Messing with your library.
Yeah. So I have a slight problem there, but now I have a Siri folder. It does have that one action in where I am just doing where I have just got things which are just basically running another thing. Because what I primarily think of when I am naming a shortcut is, how am I going to find this later in search when I want to edit it? Because this lets me, I'm not necessarily doing good shortcut naming. I'm just throwing all the keywords in the name right there, because the pretty names are just using the run shortcut action. And they pop up in menus and other places, in if flows and branches, etc. So that's what I do for that.
Nice. That makes sense. I like how many do you think are, I don't even know. I feel like we should come up with a name for how to reference that kind of thing, but just like the rename shortcut thing.
Shortcuts.
Like, do you have hundreds of those,
so if you were doing this if we were doing this on Mac OS or Windows and we were just having a link to something somewhere else so that we had a pretty name for it, it would be a shortcut. So it's a shortcut.
Like an
shortcut.
Alias. Yeah,
an alias.
Shortcut for your shortcuts, shortcuts.
It's not a symbolic link because let's call it an alias because otherwise shortcut. It's very confusing. I would say there's probably 100 or so aliases on here. It's not that many, but equally there's more there than meets the eye. And there are plenty of things that I've got here where, for example, my morning music, I didn't give that one a particularly profound name. It does just access, it gets the songs in my morning playlist, and then it hands playback off from. It usually runs actually on another device over here, which is just running shortcuts all the time for me. And it triggers that to run by a push automation server and then hands the playback off to the speakers in my bedroom for me.
Let me just show real quick. Mine is kind of a mess too, because it's the end of the summer and I'm trying to get it all together, but I have like a whole color coding system in addition to the names. And I try to have them be stuff that I could request to Siri. I think that was the biggest thing that I was missing when I turned them into submenus, is that if I just wanted to do one part of the task, I had to run the main shortcut and then find the subtask, versus like it just being available with Siri. And then I think I might do the same thing where I have basically one folder that is just called like all of my shortcuts. And then I just have a shortcut that is the folder name and it runs those shortcuts. And then that can be a little more condensed. But I have 3 whole sections of where I've gone through each of the colors and then ran out and started over again. So like this is like business stuff at the top. And then I have my content creation in the middle, and then personal stuff down at the bottom. And I will run through it quickly because we don't have enough time, but I have dedicated home screens for every single one of these things. each with like stacks on stacks of shortcuts folders for all of this kind of stuff. And so I think, it's not up to date because I haven't gotten some of the recent ones, but I think I have every single one of my shortcuts on my home screen again. And it's all through the widgets and folders and stacks. And even on each home screen, I'll have a stack that has a shortcut that activates the focus mode that you can see here. Here, let me just show all of my home screens first. I have is this 15 or something? But on each of those, I have a dedicated focus mode that hides. You can see down here at the bottom, all of the other screens go away. Oh, no, wait, this one's broken. Let me see. I can also just activate it through. Oh, man, of course. iPad OS keeps wiping out my stuff, but it should like limit the number of. Oh, man, this demo is terrible. It's not working at all. It'll just show that screen or like a set of screens. So like health, it'll show me my health screen and my travel one because I go on walks a lot and stuff like that. So this is my whole fancy. I'm basically trying to solve the problem of like, how do you take advantage of everything in shortcuts? Also like use it with Siri or just be able to understand what you have and access it. And so grouping it this way actually is really working for me. And it's pretty fascinating. And it's just exciting because there's so much potential. And that was what I accidentally did by making the shortcuts smaller. Was it just seemed like, oh, I'm doing like 20 things versus, and it's not even about me, but just like what's possible and what's useful is there's just so much variety in here that you can do. So it's unreal. It's like you can just create your own app, your own ecosystem on top of these apps, your whole home screen custom setup and everything. So this is my pitch for shortcuts because I love it. And I'm going to be sharing a ton more about how I'm doing all this stuff soon on my stuff. But I'm glad to learn from you too, because I realized that before the show, I was like, wait a second, Rosemary always interviews me on automators, but I've never actually asked her what she does. So,
well, we both do a lot of things there, Matthew.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we had this opportunity for you to ask me so many questions on shortcuts. And hopefully we're going to get you back at some point in the future to do more because, of course, shortcuts is always changing. There's always new features and occasionally some new bugs.
We can
in the meantime,
give Mike a couple more vacation days and then he can, I'm sure he wouldn't mind, so.
Thing is I do think from what he said that he does genuinely enjoy podcasting with the both of us.
Yeah,
so he might feel like he's missing out from time to time if we, maybe we should do that. Anyway, next up, we have some feedback. We have a question that's coming from Ray. And Ray says, I have a weird problem I can hope you can help with. I downloaded a new text tone from Apple and I set it as my default text tone. The problem is not all of my texts use it. Most do, but text from my wife use the default tone. I deleted all text, but that didn't help. Anything you can do would be great. Thanks, from Ray in Illinois. Well, Ray, I've got an answer for you. And the answer is very simple. Somehow, I have no idea how, the default text tone for your wife has changed for her contact. So I've opened a test contact here in my contacts app. And so that's where you're going to need to go to fix this. So you open the you open the contacts app and you go to your wife's contact entry. And you tap edit in the top right. And then if you scroll down a little bit, there should be an option for a ringtone and a text tone. And I'm thinking that this has somehow changed to something else for your wife, whatever your previous default was. And it should have the default, which is the new one, and just go back and tap on that. That should change things. It will also play that sound for you to identify it. So the default sound is the note, but it could have been input or something else. And then, of course, you've got all the ringtones down here. So if you do want to give your wife a custom ringtone, then you can do that here. You can also enable emergency bypass for your wife, which you may want to do because this will allow your wife to come through even when Do Not Disturb is on, which could be ideal if there is an emergency, which is, of course, what emergency bypass is for. But either way, hopefully this is going to answer your question on that for the time being. And if not, please do let us know. And as you can tell, if emergency bypass is on, it does show up here and it will show you in the contact as well if a custom text tone has been set.
Do you know if there's a VIP level setting also? Because I'm curious if somehow that could be it too. It's like she's the one person in the favorites, and then that has a special setting.
That is a very good point. And I had not thought about that. So there are pinned messages, which are the sort of VIPs. I can't unfortunately open my messages up to show people because then there'll be a whole bunch of information available, which I don't necessarily want to share with people. There's secrets in there. Mostly how much chocolate I'm planning on eating over the next couple of weeks. Anyway, it might be something to do with that. But I believe in order to change the text tone, you do need to do this in context. I didn't see anything for VIPs with regards to messages. I did see some stuff regarding mail. Mail VIPs have their own options, but that doesn't sync over to messages.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking of phone favorites, which is not in context actually. So maybe not. Yep. Okay. Well, just checking.
Good catch. Always appreciate that, Matthew. Anyway, next up, it's time for our app caps. And now it's time for App Cap Corner. Right. Well, in App Cap Corner or App Cap at the end of the show, we cap the show off with a fabulous hat, or a normal hat in Matthew's case, and also one of our favorite apps or an app pick for the week, or just something we thought was awesome. And Matthew, I know that you have got something and you're going to have a little challenge showing it, just like I did in my app cap last week. So I'm going to let you go first. If you can tell everybody the cap upon your head, what it looks like, and then all about your app.
Sure. So I have a hat from Normal, which is Normal VR, and they're a company that makes, trying to remember the name of the game, but you can like fly around and dance and stuff like that. And you can do hide and seek. It's a very cool company. And that my hat just says normal period on it. So I always just thought it was funny because it's like, yep, I'm just a normal guy, totally normal. Don't ask. I'm not weird. It's fine. And so I've got my iPad here showing the camera for my Apple Watch. Oh, why is it syncing? I thought this was going to sync beforehand. But it's showing things for Apple Watch. I guess you're getting the real experience here because this is the only issue that I have with it is that it takes a while to sync sometimes. Okay, let me see if I can get this to actually kick up. Oop. Oh, man.
Demoing anything on the Apple Watch is always a challenge, especially in my case, because a certain voice assistant has just popped in on my Apple Watch to go, hi, here's the answer to the question you asked. I didn't ask a question. Thanks.
I didn't ask any question. Okay, hold on. Let me get it. Maybe we can cut this part. It's not going to go, is it? Do you want to go and I can come back to it or something?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah. Okay, so my hat today is a fabulous sun hat with a wonderful pink band and a blue flower on the front. And my app cap for today is an app I'm sure many of you have heard of before, and maybe you were interested in, but you've never actually taken the time to find out about. And this is Stardew Valley. So Stardew Valley is a game where you play somebody with a little farm, and it's your job to basically improve your farmhouse and your farm, make friends with people nearby, create and destroy relationships however you may choose. And you do that by controlling your little character. My character is called iOS today. My farm is Twit. And my favorite thing is podcasting, which I set up before. So I can go around and have a look at the things in my house. Instead, I'm going to go outside and have a look at my farm. And as you can see, my farm is in complete and utter disrepair. So I need to go and try and get rid of some of these weeds, for example. And I can also do things like try and chop down trees, but I don't have the right equipment for that. So I'm going to have to try and find the right equipment or buy the right equipment later to come back to this. What I like about Stardew Valley is it's quite relaxing in that I can just sit here for a while chopping at weeds and things like that. And I feel vaguely like I've accomplished something without having to actually get up off of my comfortable sofa. Because, of course, my sofa's comfy. Why would I want to actually go somewhere? I really like this. So I'm going to go off over here now and try to go all the way back over into the village. But first, I'll stop by the box. And the box is where stuff arrives and you can drop stuff off. So I'm going to drop off some of those weeds and sell them where I can do that. And then if I just tap that and close, now I can go off. And you can see there's a little path here. And if I go to the edge of the path, then it will load the next page. And there are some places where I can go. My character is not always the best at navigating. He occasionally tries to drive through or walk through fences, which is, entertaining. This is the bus that brought me here. I could go back to town, go back to the city I came from, where I was incredibly stressed out before I came to Stardew Valley. But instead, I'm going to continue on. And you can see now I've reached town, or what passes for it around these parts. And I can go and have a little bit of exploration. I can find maybe there's a nice park up here with a beautiful fountain and some benches. And I could go sit on a bench for a while or try to sit on a bench. Apparently my character's had enough of resting. So instead we're going to go back and see if I can find the general store. And some things have moved around in the town that I usually use. But I believe there was something back here. So it looks like there's a pharmacy. I should probably go check that out because I'm new to farming. I don't really know what I'm doing. I should probably, try and make some friends with people. So I could get an energy tonic or a muscle remedy, but these cost 1,000 each and I have 500. So I'm going to have to say no to that and try and come back later when I've got some more money because, of course, I'm trying to make money. And let's see. There's some stuff happening. There's Lewis's birthday on the 7th. I don't know Lewis yet. Vince's birthday on the 10th. And then there's an egg festival on the 13th. Oh my gosh, Matthew, we've got to go to the egg festival. Let's go and try talking to this person and see what happens. Oh, she doesn't want to talk to me today. Well, she's gone shopping. That's okay. Maybe next week we can find out what it is. She said, but it was Farmer iOS Today who's come in through the door. So let's see what happens. And Matthew, have you managed to dig up things on your Apple Watch?
I'm not sure why. This is the thing that I always get confused of is it shows the active task, but for some reason in the app, it's still syncing. I mean, I'm on a beta, so I'll blame it on that. But this is the screen that I wanted to show anyways, is just the way that things shows your next task on your home screen or on your Apple Watch screen. And so I really like this because I basically go through and have like excessive checklists. Of course, you can assume based on everything else that I'm doing that my task manager is ridiculous as well. And it's just really nice to be able to see like straight from my wrist, oh, this is like the next. I have routines pumped into things on a daily basis at like certain times a day. So probably what would show up next is like my afternoon routine and it'd tell me to go make lunch or something like that. So I really like this just because it's next to Endel up there in the top right, which has the ambient information and stuff like that. So things for iPhone is only $9.99, and this to me is the only Apple Watch app that can actually show me my tasks on my wrist and let me check them off. And I don't understand why. Or maybe OmniFocus probably can, but I always had a bunch of. I like the visual experience of things for Apple Watch also.
Yeah,
I will not insult OmniFocus.
Thank you. I do like OmniFocus myself, and of course, everybody has their own preferences when it comes to these things. But things, as you said, things is $9.99, and that's actually the iPhone app, which will then sync over to the Apple Watch. But you can also buy it $9.99 for the iPad version, and there is also a Mac version as well available for purchase. I should have mentioned Yes, the Mac app version is $49.99. And Things is a beautiful experience. And we will cover it again at some point here on iOS Today. I'm sure we're going to have another Task Manager showdown. I'm afraid, people, I'm still firmly in the OmniFocus corner here, but I'm always open to new experiences. So if you've got a Task Manager you want us to cover, do let us know. And speaking of things that you want us to cover, if you've got feedback for us, questions, anything you want answered, a curiosity that you've maybe spotted somewhere on your iPhone or your iPad, your Apple Watch, even your Apple TV or HomePod, then you can get in touch with us and tell us about this and tell us that you want us to cover it or just ask us a question. And you can do that by emailing us iostoday@twit.tv. You can also tweet at us with the hashtag AskIOSToday, or of course, you're very welcome to post in our Club Twit Discord. Club Twit, you say? What's Club Twit? Well, if you want to check out all of our shows ad-free, you can check out Club Twit. It is $7 a month, and it gets you every Twit show every Twitch show, MacBreak Weekly, This Week in Tech, This Week in Google, all of the great shows for $7 a month with no ads. And it's exclusive Twit Plus feed with extra content. And there's, of course, the members only Discord I mentioned, where you can join in with some of our other live viewers if you like to have a chat about the show. Of course, if you're not available to follow us live, that's fine. You're also very welcome to subscribe to the show. In fact, please do subscribe to the show. That's how we love it. Love it if you download it. And you can subscribe to that, of course, in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, or in any podcast app of your choice. And just go to twit.tv/iOS to click the link. There's subscribe to audio, but of course, if you want the greatest experience, you can subscribe to the video version as well and get this in whichever app you prefer. We are here every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, and 1700 UTC. And if you want to follow us, then please do. Matthew, how can people follow you?
You can go to my website at matthewcassinelli.com, where I have a whole shortcuts catalog where I share all of my shortcuts, an action directory where I define all 300 actions and shortcuts, and I'm sneak peek, I'm going to add third-party actions soon-ish. They'll be coming out in batches. But I also run a membership program that I'd love for anybody to sign up for, where I basically give people sneak previews of all the stuff that I'm working on, do membership live streams and stuff like that. So check it out.
Excellent. You can find me over at rosemaryorchard.com or with the username rosemaryorchard on Twitter and micro.blog. And in the meantime, Micah will be back next week with me in our regular time slot, and we will look forward to seeing you all then. Goodbye, everyone.
Hey, if you like tech news, but you also like hearing about it from the people who are actually writing the stories, well, I've got a show for you. It's called Tech News Weekly, and it's me, Jason Howell, along with my co-host, Micah Sargent. Every week, we invite the people making and breaking the biggest tech news stories from around the web onto this show to talk to us about it. It's a lot of fun. You should check it out. Tech News Weekly can be found at twit.tv/TNW every Thursday. We'll see you there.